We'll get started. We'll wait to do item number 1 until we have everyone here that is attending in person. And again, thanks to those that have joined online. So skipping item number 1, go to item number 2, conflict of interest reminder. That's just a reminder everyone has to fill in a conflict of interest form, all the commission members. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly? Where is that on, where can we go to find that?
So the conflict of interest, everyone should fill out a conflict of interest form when you begin your term on the commission.
Okay.
And it sounds like
Yeah, if you could speak into the microphone so everybody online can hear you.
Sorry about that. So members of the commission should fill out a conflict of interest form when they begin their term on the commission. If you haven't already filled one out, I believe Carly has some available for you to fill out today.
Okay, and so they are, are those available online as well?
No, they are not online. So you should fill the one out that's before you. If those online need a copy, we can make sure to get them a copy of that conflict of interest form for them to fill out.
Okay, could we just email those out and then people could fill them out and
Yes.
scan them and send them back? Or you've already done that?
Sounds like Carly already emailed those out.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carly. So please check your emails and fill out the conflict of interest form if you haven't already done so. If people have been on for a little while and have already done that, then, and we have that on file, then hopefully we should be good. But I imagine, Carly, you would know who we have that on file for, and you can chase down those that we don't have them on file. Okay.
That's right. And just by way of reminder, if for some reason any of the categories on that form change for you at any time during your tenure on the commission, just make sure you update that conflict of interest form. And again, Carly can provide you with a new form so you could disclose any conflicts that might be at issue. But if it doesn't change and you've already filled out your form, then you should be in good shape.
And really, it's just looking for any potential entity that you're a part of that might have a conflict. I mean, if it's something completely unrelated, there's no reason to disclose it.
That's
correct?
right. So there's actually 2 categories for disclosure. The first is if you have ownership or you're otherwise employed by or the director of an entity that is subject to regulation by the Outdoor Adventure Commission or the Division of Outdoor Recreation, then you need to disclose that. But again, if it's not subject to regulation by DOR or OAC, then you don't need to worry about it. The second category would be if you're involved in some sort of transaction that's to be approved by the Division of Recreation or the Division of Outdoor Recreation or the Outdoor Adventure Commission. Both of those are listed here on the conflict of interest form that you were provided today and that were emailed to the group. So if either of those were to change, then you'd need to update, but otherwise, as long as you fill this out, you're in good shape.
Okay, that's a really important clarification, that it's only entities that are regulated by the commission or the division, which is probably not highly likely.
I'm having a hard time thinking of any that would be directly regulated by the OAC or the Division of Outdoor Recreation, but it's something to keep in mind because that is what's required under the law.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, let's go back to item 1, which is welcome. So welcome everyone to the May Outdoor Adventure Commission meeting. I'm Representative Stenquist. I'll be chairing the meeting, and we have quite a few people online, commission members and others, including Senator Cullimore, who's our Senate representative, and others. So welcome everyone who's online and in person. Hello. So we'll do the swearing in of new commission members, and we do have some new commission members. I guess. What was it, if I remember the number, HB 384 is effective now, and so a few changes have been made, including one of the changes was changing it from, we've had additional local representation, so we have 2 from the Association of Counties and 2 from the League of Cities and Towns. So welcome to Brandy Grace from Association of Counties, as well as we have Darren Bushman online from the Association of Counties. And who else is new? We have Scott Strong here from State Parks. So thank you. That was another seat that was added to the commission with that bill. And then we still have Kate from Bountiful City with the League of Cities and Towns. And then you have to remind me who is the other Santa Clara represented council person. Krista? Is that Krista?
That's me, Krista Hinton.
Hi, Krista. Welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Commission meeting, even though you're in sunny St. George area, sunny Washington County.
Thank you.
It's great to have all of you joining us on the commission, and look forward to working with you. So who's going to be conducting the oath of swearing in of the new commissioners? Oh, is that taken care of already? Okay, is it? So we've got the affidavits with the notary that was just here that we've signed.
Sure, it sounds like the notary administered those oaths and signed the forms prior to the meeting beginning.
Okay.
Is that correct?
At least for those that are in the room, and so for those folks that are remote.
So for those that are remote, if you did not take the oath today and you have not filled out your form, my suggestion would be you participate in the meeting today, but if a vote comes before the commission, you not vote until you are sworn as a member of the commission. I don't think that will affect most of you. It sounds like it's a minority of folks who have not yet been sworn in, but that would be my suggestion to you. As far as being sworn in, you could do that with a notary wherever you happen to be located, or we could arrange to for you to take the oath via a remote notary, so via electronic means. And I think Carly could probably coordinate that, so I'll let her head that up and get in touch with those who still need to be sworn.
Great, thank you. Add that to the list of things with where Carly can help coordinate with the disclosures, the conflict of interest disclosures and the swearing in and the oaths. But thanks to everyone who's in attendance today. All right, with that, we will move on to item number 3 on the agenda, approval of December and March minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from March? All right, Director Curry has made a motion to approve the December and March minutes. Do I have a second? Pitt has seconded that. Any discussion on that motion? If none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, I rule that's unanimous, and those minutes are approved. All right, we'll move on to item number 4, which is a strategic planning update from Dr. Smith.
Great.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Representative Stenquist. It's great to be here on a nice spring day. We finally got one. I'm going to do a quick recap, maybe for the new commission members, of what the strategic plan entailed, the scope of work that was laid out for the team of Utah State, but then spend the bulk of the time today talking about we're proposing to be the core of the strategic plan. So just to kind of quickly recap, there were several different tasks that are part of the strategic planning process. Really, the idea being that each of these tasks provides pieces of data and information that can help inform the strategic objectives for the plan itself. And those tasks were, number one, and probably most notable as we get ready to start back up our spring workshop series, was to convene a series of workshops, a series of workshops in the fall of 2022 and one in the spring of 2023, to garner public input from different stakeholders around Utah on what they thought were the critical threats to outdoor recreation across the state, as well as what they thought the critical opportunities were within that particular region. And our geographic boundaries are the 7 AOG regions within Utah, and that's how we've organized the specific workshops. So we are about ready to launch our spring workshop series. I think everybody has received a couple of emails, hopefully not too pestering. I trust me, they are a lot more pestering to the people that we're inviting to come to the workshops, where we're sending about 3 or 4 3 or 4 invites. The first of which is going to be next Friday in Richfield, the day following the Utah Trails Forum. So I hope everybody will have a chance to maybe at least consider coming down to that one. It's going to be a great kickoff to the spring workshop series. And then a couple the following week, where we could be coming back up here and having one for the Wasatch Front region. And then, forget right now, the Mountain Lands region, so the Wasatch Back in Utah County. And then if you haven't seen that schedule, please email either myself or Carly, and we'll get you the formal invites so you can actually sign up for one of those. As part of the strategic planning process, we have to have at least two Outdoor Adventure Commission members at each of those workshops. Representative Stanquist, you were going to say something?
I was just going to mention that, I mean, thank you very much for the work to get those set up. And I'm looking forward to those. I do plan on being at the one in Richfield this week. There are a couple of them that conflict with legislative interim days. And I don't know, I mean, if that's just a problem for myself or other legislators, that's one thing. If it's a broader impact, then maybe we might consider that. But there might be a lot of stakeholders that maybe aren't so involved in the legislative process, then it's not an issue.
Yeah, I've received a few emails from state legislators about not this week, but I believe next week during the interim session, as well as the Utah Association of Counties meeting, or there's a meeting that's going on. I can't remember what the conflict was for one that was next week as well. And so we were looking at scheduling a kind of a wild card for them.
Western Interstate Region in Mayfield in Washington County.
Yeah, and there was quite a few county folks that said that they wouldn't be able to make it for that one. So we're looking at scheduling an 8th workshop for the spring that's kind of going to be a wild card. We'll invite a couple of state legislators. Representative Andrig had mentioned that he really wanted to make it, but couldn't. And so we'll make sure the county folks get invited to that one as well. So the spring workshop series, again, the purpose of those really is to just get public input and to foster discussions on what these critical needs are for outdoor recreation across the state, believing that those needs can then inform the development of the plan that the commission is going to approve later this year. Other tasks that we've been working on, and the first one that we actually did was a funding analysis of how outdoor recreation and tourism is funded within the state. So we really took a deep dive into Utah State Code and actually mapped out every single dollar that goes through a state entity within Utah and how that funds outdoor recreation and tourism in one way or the other. And so we have that report, and it's finalized and is going to be one of the reports that's referenced in the strategic plan. So the idea is that there will be several different reports, each corresponding to one of the tasks that we were mandated to complete. And then those can be pieces of data that the strategic plan can reference back to. So we made some specific policy recommendations in that strategic funding or the funding analysis that have already been acted on. And so we'll reference back to those reports basically to say, here's the data and here's the information that you can use to make your decisions or use to support the claims that are in the strategic plan. So the first was that statewide strategic funding analysis, the statewide funding analysis, and the second was a comparative analysis where we looked across all 11 Western states and looked at how Utah differed with how we're funding and supporting and managing outdoor recreation. So those are the two parts of the strategic planning work that we've completed so far. We're working through the workshops this spring, and the other two key components were to actually develop projections of outdoor recreation demand across Utah, looking at as fine a spatial scale as we can manage given the data that we have access to, and looking at projections for different levels of demand in each of the different AOG regions. So that's a report that we're working on. And then the final task was to develop a comprehensive database of all the outdoor recreation assets that exist within the state. And if, excuse me, if you came to one of our fall workshops, we had these huge 8-foot by 16-foot maps where we plotted all the data that we have on every single trail and every single campground and every single river access point within the state. And we asked people to, if we had data that we're missing, to put those data on the map. And so we've been compiling that, and that's an ongoing process to identify what will be the most comprehensive database of outdoor recreation assets that exist, not just on state lands, but on federal lands and county lands and municipal lands all across Utah. So those are a summary of the tasks that we've been working on. The idea is that each of those tasks will be completely reported on in a separate report. As I mentioned, we've already got a couple of those done. And then there's going to be the plan itself, the strategic plan itself, which is going to be a fairly short summary document that highlights the key findings from all of those reports, and as I mentioned, provides some backing for the claims and direction forward that the strategic plan is charting. Does that make sense with where we're at in the 2-year process of developing the strategic plan?
Do we have a question online? Or no?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Hey, Jordan, is there a place where we can reference those 2 reports that are in final form?
Yes, we're going to get them up on the DOR website. DOR has requested that we provide some text to basically create a landing page for the strategic planning process. Mm-hmm. So any interested stakeholder can see, the strategic planning process is ongoing. Here's the products that have been developed so far, and then once the strategic plan is approved and codified, we can actually put that there as well, and it can be like the formal long-term resting place for it. But we don't have that up yet, Vicki, but it's in the works.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that'll be really important to have something to really start pointing people to. Here's what's going on with the strategic plan, where people can reference that. I think that'll be really excellent. So Mike, I have a question. Do we think the time frame is to have sort of the draft plan in place?
We're hoping to get that out by kind of mid-July.
Okay.
And what I wanted to do today, spend the bulk of the time today, is walk through what is kind of going to be the core, what we're proposing to be the core of that strategic plan, and what we're going to be taking back out to the stakeholders in the spring regional workshop series and asking them for more specific insights and to say, does this align with what you told us in the fall, and does it align with what might have transpired over the last 6 months since they met with us last.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
So I want to walk through, as I mentioned, what we are proposing to be the core of the outdoor recreation strategic plan. Carly, if you could share the slide that I had put out. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I have given everybody a handout which has what we're calling the 4 cardinal directions. So the compass that can take you in any direction as you go down, chart your way on a trail. The idea is that there are 4 cardinal directions that are based on the feedback that we received from the spring workshops and the data that we've compiled in the state funding report, as well as the comparative Western States report. And these cardinal directions, 4 of them, can improve the outdoor recreation opportunities and ability of individuals to get outside and enjoy the outdoors within Utah. So the idea is that we'll have 4 cardinal directions, 4 basic essentials that Utah needs to take, or essential directions that Utah can take to advance outdoor recreation development and management within the state. Each of these each of these directions is supported by individual objectives. So what is the purpose of these individual directions? And then under each of those objectives is specific policies, projects, and programs that tier off of those individual objectives. So you can kind of think of it as if your cardinal directions are your grandfathers, your individual objectives are your fathers, and your policies, projects, and programs are your children. So there's some sort of hierarchical structure here to outline what these cardinal directions are. I'm going to walk through this in a little bit of detail, and people who are online can see what Carly has shared up on the screen. But the cardinal directions really stem from those 4 major threats that we identified in the fall workshops. The first being to build and support partnerships across state, federal, and local resource management agencies within Utah. to improve awareness about outdoor recreation improve awareness and education about responsible recreation within the state. The third being to develop infrastructure that meets current and projected demands while conserving natural landscapes. And the fourth being to increase the economic benefits in less populated but more visited destinations. So those are four themes that resonated across all 7 regions in the in the fall workshop series. Any initial thoughts on those 4 general directions, general basic values that we think, if Utah puts more effort into, will lead to substantive increases and improvements in how we provide outdoor recreation opportunities?
Any input on that? Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, looking through this looks really good. The question I have is was there a point brought up that addressed busy areas like our national parks and trying to distribute some of that public use to areas that aren't as busy?
Yeah, that's a critical point to the third point, and these are in no particular order. We can reorganize them if there would be some logical reason that the commission would like to do that. But develop outdoor recreation infrastructure in areas that meet current and projected demand while conserving natural landscapes. And this really gets at that point of trying to concentrate use to where there is an existing demand, but a lack of infrastructure that's required to meet that demand. So how do we actually provide continuing opportunities for access without just providing new development everywhere? The idea is that we can identify where those areas of demand are, where are those specific geographic locations, where those specific activities that need more infrastructure and that need more management support, and put the resources into those particular locations. So it's not essentially about distributing use across the board. It's identifying where are those gaps in infrastructure that limit access to outdoor recreation across the state. In recreation resource management, one of the fundamental principles is that we actually try to concentrate use as much as we can to the extent that there is an adequate amount of infrastructure to accommodate that use. So kind of a critical example of this is how do you solve issues of trail degradation in like the central Wasatch? And the idea is, well, most people we know from some of the studies that we've done, like the average trip in the central Wasatch is about 46 minutes from the time people actually leave their car to they get back in their car, which is shockingly short. Right? So the idea is that most people, when they go out on outdoor recreation, when they're going out to participate in outdoor recreation, are doing so in a fairly short amount of time. Any of the guys from state parks can tell you this, and most of the trails that state parks or national parks manage within Utah are less than 3 miles in length, because the vast majority of users want locations and resources that are more proximate to them. So the idea, by concentrating use, by providing that adequate infrastructure, more trails, more resources that are in a more confined location, you can serve the public better by providing more access to outdoor recreation in a more concentrated location, while also conserving the more remote destinations that less people actually want to get to. So it's not just about distributing people across the board, it's more about trying to identify where there's that gap and there's a huge demand for outdoor recreation in a particular location, but there might not be the particular infrastructure or resources to actually allow people to enjoy those locations where that demand is.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. That makes sense. Thanks.
Well, and I have a question about the fourth one on the list, and it maybe ties in a little bit to Jason's question. Increase economic benefits. I think it's good. Like one of these cardinal directions is the potential for economic benefit to different communities, and I know that some communities will look to build out some infrastructure in order to attract and build some economic development in their areas. Some communities may be interested in that more than others. Others may want to keep people out. I've heard that as well. How do we keep all those Wasatch Front people from invading our area? But so I'm just kind of curious about the wording here. Increase economic benefits in less populated but more visited locations, because there might be less populated areas that want some economic development and want some visitation, others that don't, some that currently aren't having visitation but would like some, others that are having visitation but maybe they lack a little bit of infrastructure. Like I'm thinking about like when we were in the Uinta Basin, there's a lot of potential there, but a lot of it is undeveloped. And then, you weigh that with what's the interest of that community in developing some of their outdoor recreation assets. So I think economic benefits is certainly a really important area. I'm just wondering how to best sort of define or phrase that approach.
Yeah, and that's the general threat here that was consistently identified in all these group workshops. We have 75% of the state living in 4 counties along the Wasatch Front, and the vast majority of the economic benefits that come from outdoor recreation are accruing in those 4 counties, where
Right.
people are buying their
As
goods,
opposed to where it's that recreation
where
is
it's
actually happening
So
oftentimes. Yeah.
the idea here is that if there was mechanisms, policies, programs, or projects that would allow those communities in rural locations of the state that are receiving all of this visitation to appropriately plan for and develop those outdoor recreation assets in the ways that they think are the most appropriate, that's the most viable solution. But they have to have an economic, a flow of resources to actually allow them to plan for and accommodate that use if they choose to.
Right.
And they could, if there is a specific decision to want to reallocate or earmark specific tax funds from urban locations, like say state sales tax on particular goods and services, to more rural locations of the state, to plan for and manage outdoor recreation in those locations of the state. It should really be up to those counties that are receiving those funds to determine how they want to provide and manage outdoor recreation. So it's ultimately a decision that would give more authority to the local outdoor recreation managers and providers to actually make those decisions, but it's just an acknowledgement that there needs to be some strategic thought into how that authority is given to those local counties.
I appreciate that. I think that's really good. And since you mention it, those are conversations that I've started to have in terms of potential legislation and revenue funding for the upcoming session. I think from my perspective, it's a high priority. And I've also, I made sure that we included that in our interim study items for the Economic Development Workforce Services Committee. So we will be studying that specific policy area and funding mechanisms in the interim, with the anticipation of putting together some legislation for the upcoming session.
Great.
Yeah. So
Mr.
this
Chair.
info will be really good. Yeah, Brenda.
Yeah, I really appreciate this, and I was pleased to see search and rescue. A couple
Yeah.
of examples that just come to mind: Rich County, Wayne County. The tourism and the recreating is happening, whether they're prepared for it or not. It exists, but the restrictions on TRT, but then the demands of law enforcement and waste management, those are real challenges that they're having. So
Yeah.
I appreciate your acknowledgement of that, and certainly an area where we can work on.
Yeah, and I think the focus will be on maybe finding a revenue source that's not based on TRT, but a different source of funding, and could cover things like search and rescue, public safety, waste management, those kind of things. I've been hearing a lot about that, so I think this will be a great opportunity to coordinate that.
Yeah, that aligns a lot with what our team has been discussing. The idea of restructuring TRT is not one that seems like a lot of people want to go down.
Right.
And we've been discussing a lot of other creative solutions that could solve those needs for providing the flexibility that counties and local municipalities need in providing those resources or providing outdoor recreation opportunities in the way that they want to. And this, we actually have on here, one of our major policies, projects, and programs is the potential to redistribute a fraction of sales tax from certain types of establishments to all counties, proportional to the amount of outdoor recreation use that's happening within those counties.
Yeah.
So this directly kind of circumvents that a lot of hot touch points around TRT, but also solves a lot of the challenges that our rural communities are facing. We recognize that the visitation, as Brandy mentioned, like spot on. It does not really matter whether or not Uintah County and Daggett County want visitation or not. It's happening. They need the economic resources to plan for and manage that visitation in a way that they want to manage and plan for that visitation. That might be purchasing land for conservation easements, or purchasing land for agricultural leases in ways that disincentivize outdoor recreation use a little bit. But if they want to do that, there needs to be a mechanism to actually provide them with the fiscal resources to do that.
Yeah, and if I could, just wanted to state that, we recognize the counties have done some creative work with TRT because they've seen it as, here, the problems that exist are from this situation. And so, we recognize that there's been a little bit of cherry picking. We're not looking at TRT necessarily, but certainly other ways of dealing with the problems that they're facing. So we, at our management conference just a couple of weeks ago, met with the Tourism Industry Association and also had a conversation about coming together to brainstorm over, some of these ideas aside from TRT and what's been done historically.
Great.
If I could walk through a couple of these.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
If I can just add in here. So I think you've all made this point well, but the third bullet on the third cardinal direction still references TRT in a way that I think we may want to shore up that language a little bit, because you've all just referenced how many constraints there are with TRT. So I don't really know for sure what that third bullet, increasing the use of TRT funds to support natural area conservation. I just want to be careful that we're not adding more to a really constrained resource.
No, I think that's a great point, Vicki, and probably a little bit of confusion on the wording there. The idea being there that TRT funds can be used for the project funds to actually purchase land for conservation, and that there is this very nice balance in outdoor recreation infrastructure development funding, that the state now has multiple streams to develop outdoor recreation infrastructure and those TRT dollars. So just to highlight the flexibility that counties have in using either of those streams to the extent that they want to use either of those streams. And there's nothing that confines them to using those streams for natural area conservation. They could use them all for tourism development and for more traditional projects. But this just highlights that there is a nice balance in mechanisms that currently exist in how the counties can actually fund either conservation or outdoor recreation infrastructure development.
It might be good, maybe, I would suggest maybe just take out the TRT, just say like increase funding, and just leave it a little bit more generic so that it's not as specific to that.
Yeah, and just to mention that these are just examples. These are our high-level projects, policies, and programs. And what we are going to be doing in our spring workshop series is presenting the individual cardinal directions and the objectives, assuming we get the blessing of the OAC, that these are general ideas that make a lot of sense for us to get more input on. And then leaving those policies, programs, and projects blank and asking for more feedback on what are the policies, projects, and programs that make a lot of sense in the 6-county region, in the Rich County, in the Wasatch Front, because those policies and projects and programs are going to be very different across the 7 different regions that we look at.
And I imagine that once we get to have an actual draft plan, then we can start, talking about maybe changing some wording and things like that. This is just a presentation. So
yeah. This is just to make sure that we are on the same page with what the stakeholders are going to hear in the spring workshop series. They're not going to see any of these example policies, projects, or programs, but we would like to present the specific cardinal directions and the objectives as the main trends that came out of our fall workshop series, as well as the reporting that we've done so far.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Representative Smith, if I can raise one more question. the first bullet on the third cardinal direction, support infrastructure development in urban areas where demand is rising faster than rural areas. I think this gets a little bit tricky because maybe the volume of demand is greater in urban areas, but the impact is sometimes greater in rural areas. I don't know that I necessarily have information that supports that the demand is always greater in the urban areas. Maybe there's something I'm not remembering from the findings of all the workshops, but
No,
yeah,
that's a great point, Vicky. I did not, and maybe that wording is slightly off with how it's favoring urban areas at the expense of rural areas. It was really intended to highlight the fact that there is a wealth of opportunities to support outdoor recreation infrastructure development in urban areas, in addition to more wildland recreation settings. So we heard a lot in the urban, the Wasatch Front and the Mountain Lands region about the need and demand for alternatives to outdoor recreation opportunities in the central Wasatch. So providing outdoor recreation infill type projects, the Jordan River Corridor, Utah Lake, the Great Salt Lake as opportunities to increase those outdoor recreation opportunities in our urban areas that we typically might not think about. I was talking this morning with Jake Powell, who's also on our team up at Utah State, and we just completed a study of outdoor recreation use at Utah Lake, and about 50% of all the people who live within Salt Lake County or Utah County have recreated at Utah Lake at one time in the past 12 months. But you look at the outdoor recreation infrastructure that's provided at Utah Lake, and it is shocking that many people are using that resource, and that they have the access, the resources that are provided there are what they are.
Which you're saying are inadequate, or?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I've heard that, for example, the Corner Canyon system in Draper is one of the most heavily used trail systems in the U.S. And it's just because it's in my backyard, and I was on it this morning. So it's just the usage isn't always on the weekends in the rural areas, but just daily use in the local, close to access trails that we have just in the Wasatch.
Yeah. There is a huge constituency of outdoor recreationists across the state that we typically don't think about. We typically think about outdoor recreation as skiing and our notable trips to southern Utah. But the vast majority of outdoor recreation within Utah is day trips to municipal and county lands, and even state park lands in the Wasatch. Utah Lake State Park was part of that study, and a good majority of the visitors to Utah Lake State Park are going down there to fish every day. These are the vast majority of what outdoor recreation participation looks like within Utah for Utah residents, not for people who are coming from out of state. So we just wanted to draw that point here that there are a lot of opportunities for infrastructure development in our urban areas outside of what we typically think of as these big infrastructure development projects that might happen in southern Utah or in more rural locations of the state.
Mm-hmm. Scott, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. And Jordan, thanks for putting all this information together. I'm a little bit late to the game, but I have reviewed your report, your draft report, which is great information. One of the things that I would love to know more about is, we've talked a lot about the where and the what, but the demographics of who are coming to recreate and then reaching out to those outliers and engaging them more. How do we do that? Was that addressed either in the strategic plan or in the data that you gathered? Are you looking at demographics as part of this as well?
Yeah, we do have a statewide survey, which is we reported about in one of our reports about how frequently people are participating in outdoor recreation and what those socio-demographic breakdowns look like. We also
you are collecting demographics, not just number of people.
Not just number of people. Yes, and we haven't shared that with the commission yet. That's going to be in our report on the projections of outdoor recreation demand across different activity types for each of the 7 different regions. But I can tell you from a variety of different studies that we've done. We're doing one on the Central Wasatch, visitor use on the Central Wasatch. As I mentioned, just the one on Utah Lake. There is a notable differentiation in the demographics of visitors and what they expect as far as outdoor recreation infrastructure goes across the state, with obviously the Central Wasatch, the primary Wasatch Front becoming more and more sociodemographically diverse. And those individuals, when they participate in recreation, tend to want larger resources, larger pavilions, campgrounds.
What about, are you collecting information on, age and gender, those pieces of information as well?
Yeah, and we have it from a variety of different sources.
Okay.
Some agencies have been doing it very well, collecting that data very well, and some agencies are a little bit less rigorous in how they've been collecting that. So, yeah, it's ultimately dependent upon the quality of the data that we're getting, but we do have a good snapshot across different resource types.
Great, thanks.
Yes, Director Curry.
Yeah, so one more question on that third cardinal direction and the objectives. The second bullet under the objectives, concentrate outdoor recreation use to those areas where there is adequate infrastructure and environmental disturbance has already occurred. So what about the other side of that coin where there is not adequate infrastructure? So, I think what your prior answer when I asked was kind of like you're addressing it from the supply side, basically, where there's not adequate infrastructure. Is that part of this? And then on the other side of the coin, what about in areas where on the demand side, obviously favoring conservation and good stewardship of our landscapes, but are there areas that currently are a candidate for increasing demand for, and basically highlighting to say, hey, look, you're going to these places and beating them to death and crowding the parking lots. There's an area over here that the local community wants to have developed for recreation use, and inform the public about those areas as well, kind of almost along the lines of the Red Emerald program.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And the idea there is one where if there is not adequate infrastructure there, but there is some infrastructure already there, that's a primary location where you would want to make strategic investments to make sure that infrastructure is adequate. A great example is here on the Central Wasatch. Speaking again to the Central Wasatch study that we're doing at the currently, a lot of the outdoor recreation use that happens in the Central Wasatch is either at the ski resorts, which have been developed for 40, 50 years at least, and along the foothills. And we have a lot of the central reaches of the canyon that are not getting a lot of trail use, primarily in the summer months. And a recommendation in those locations, and what we've told the Forest Service on that particular project, is that a strategic direction is to increase the amount of infrastructure to where it's adequate at those locations where there's already an extensive amount of environmental disturbance at ski resorts and along the foothills, as a way to mitigate the rise of demand in the central reaches of the Wasatch, primarily in the areas 3 wilderness areas. So this kind of speaks to that. If it's not adequate already, but there is some sort of infrastructure in place, those are primary areas where we would recommend putting in place the infrastructure to meet that level of demand. So more trails and more adequate infrastructure along the foothills, where we know that there's more demand than we can possibly meet, but there is not that infrastructure that's in place to provide that demand. And by doing that, the idea is that you're conserving the need for building trails where they're only providing a marginal benefit to the outdoor recreating public.
Yeah. So just to follow up on it, would it be worth having a mirroring bullet point under the objectives to address those areas that don't have adequate infrastructure?
Yeah, I think we can work on the wording for that one.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on these objectives as we've kind of walked through them?
I can't necessarily see if there's somebody raising their hand online, so feel free to speak up.
So what we are working towards is this being essentially the core of the strategic plan. 4 cardinal directions that each are supported by specific objectives which the Outdoor Adventure Commission thinks are worthwhile pursuits of the Division of Outdoor Recreation, as well as other agencies that provide outdoor recreation across Utah. And then there's, within each of those objectives, a set of specific policies, projects, and programs that all can be used to make decisions either on a daily basis or in more strategic, coordinated fashion in the allocation of funding that the Outdoor Adventure Commission has the responsibility of making recommendations to the state legislature for. So this can be seen as a rubric, if you will, if we are going to develop a specific mechanism for the projects to be brought to the Outdoor Adventure Commission, that this can provide as a rubric for those projects to be weighted against. Are you meeting specific objectives within the strategic plan? Are you meeting multiple directions that were laid out as the principal directions of the strategic plan? And it can also be used as an evaluation metric for other programs that already exist. The Division of Outdoor Recreation's UORG grant programs are a great example of this. The idea here is hopefully that the strategic planning direction has a little bit more weight beyond just the decisions of the Outdoor Adventure Commission and the projects that are forwarded to the state legislature. Maybe these are also key directions that can find their way into the UORG grant programs and have a little bit more pervasive role in shaping outdoor recreation across the state. We really see that as a great opportunity, and having the strategic plan and these specific directions as being the specific priorities that are pervasive not only within the OAC, but also across the decisions of Division of Outdoor Recreation and maybe even possibly across state parks if they see a similar alignment in their actions.
I think that's a great point and a really good segue into our next agenda item. If this concludes your presentation on this item.
Yeah, I will just quickly mention that we will be presenting this at all of the regional workshops with just the cardinal directions and the objectives, but the specific policies, projects, and programs are going to be essentially the tasks, what we want the stakeholders to come up with. We don't want them to lead them and say, the Outdoor Recreation Initiative is something that you now have to figure out how to use, and we want you to use that now that that foundation has been put in place. We want them to come up with their own policies, projects, and programs that they think are most useful. Again, this gets back to the idea of those are going to be very, very different across the state. And then the Division of Outdoor Recreation and other state agencies will have effectively a list of major and maybe minor policies, projects, and programs that all tear back to these specific objectives. And so that's our task in the spring workshop series, is really to fill out this last column of what are those policies, projects, and programs. And then that will be included in the strategic plan as well.
Great. Jason, do you
Yeah,
have
just
a
one more
comment?
quick question on it. So it's in draft now. Do you plan on keeping it in draft form as we go through the workshop process, or is your plan to have this, at least the cardinal directions part of it, finalized before that?
No, this will be in draft form, and we might get more feedback or consistent feedback across all the workshops where we're like, oh, that bullet point doesn't really work for a lot of us, and so we might drop that one or change it. It will stay in draft form until we come back to the OAC in July, as I mentioned, with that full draft plan, and then you can revise it and do with it what you want.
Great, thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. And like I was saying, I think that was a good segue, because we want to talk about how about this process for prioritizing projects. So I'll give some context to this. When this commission was first created with the legislation that was passed in 2020, as a matter of fact, so it's been a few years. The original vision for this commission is that it would be a temporary commission that would really just focus on creating the strategic plan, and then the commission would sunset. But over the last couple of legislative sessions, the roles and responsibilities of this commission have changed, and one of the things that's been added is that really this commission now is intended to be a permanent commission that will not only complete the process of the strategic plan this year, but and could also make additional revisions in the future as the plan is updated, but also to provide some oversight and prioritization for resource allocation and funding, similar to what is done in the, with the transportation advisory committees where transportation projects are evaluated and prioritized. Some of those are, and there are various grant programs that are currently being administered, and there are currently advisory committees, for the OHV program, for the UORG program. There are specific advisory committees that prioritize those projects. But then this commission, and with the passage, I think it was included in HB 384 this year, that a percentage, and I should know the percentage because I ran that bill, but it was 20.
Well, 53% goes to the outdoor adventure restricted account.
Right, and so then of that money, the outdoor adventure, this commission would prioritize, was it
19 million?
$19 million basically, a percentage, but actually it's $19 million.
There was a $19 million appropriation and then a future 53%.
Yeah, so a good portion of that money, that's a good amount of money. This commission will be responsible for reviewing potential projects, for allocating those funds, and where those projects should be spent, and then those, of course, will be recommendations that would then still have to go to the legislature. But hopefully, it's my hope that we can create a sort of a culture of this is the process, and rather than having individual legislators running RFAs for projects in their areas, that we could have projects that are vetted, with nice transparency through this commission, and then the prioritization process of how we would prioritize those projects would be weighed against the criteria that we come up with in the strategic plan. So really the strategic plan is the guiding document for how we want to prioritize and allocate the funding and resources to help accomplish the goals laid out in the strategic plan. So that's how those things fit together. And so what this next item is, and I guess I'll turn this over to Jason to talk about this, is, this is a new process that we're standing up, and we have some precedent that we can look to. I've referred to the transportation prioritization process that I think works very well, that we can use as an example of how to do this. But really, we're creating this new process from scratch with outdoor recreation funding. So that's what this next agenda item is just to kind of talk about the nuts and bolts of what that process is going to be for submitting projects, for reviewing them, for recommending them, and so forth. So I know I'll turn it over, Jason, to you to talk in more detail about it.
Okay, yeah, and to follow up on what you were suggesting, the strategic plan as it is finalized will be a really valuable resource for us, obviously for everything we do, including UORG, for projects that are proposed under the new Recreation Coordinated Investment Initiative, or as I've started calling it, RECI. I'm just kind of floating that right now. We can call it Recreation Coordinated Investment Initiative, or we can call it RECI. I don't know. But anyway, so as a result of HB 224 from Representative Stenquist, there are a few shalls that the division was given in that bill, but it's we've gotten 60 days under our belt since the session ended, so we've got the shalls in there that include designating staff. So we've selected Patrick Morrison based on his experience, knowledge, and success with the UORG grant. He'll be administering this initiative, and already have been kind of hitting the ground running with that. So that's one of the shalls. The other shall is to develop and oversee a project proposal process, which is what you're talking about. What is the nuts and bolts? How does this mirror some of the ways that the transportation folks do it in their world? And then we have to report in November to the legislature to interim. So what Patrick's already done is set up meetings with the Forest Service, the BLM. We're also going to have a meeting with National Park Service and probably others, and start just gathering information. What are the projects that would be good candidates for this? What are the agreements that might be good to have? And then sort of look at all of those projects and all of those possible agreements, and then come up with that process, that approval process, and bring it back to this group and have something that can use the strategic plan as its kind of main guiding document, and then probably some other criteria like interagency nature, economic development, most of which will probably fall within the cardinal directions. Which, by the way, I really like. This is going to make an amazing core to the plan, and really looking forward to the workshops. But we're fairly fresh into the process, but that's what we intend to do. Like Representative Stenquist said, there is a kind of a free-for-all during legislative session with RFAs, requests for appropriation. There are probably some candidates in the last session that would have been good fits for this initiative. So there may be some of those that come back next year. And I would hope that in the future, we get this project proposal process developed to the point where it's in the culture of the legislature. Anytime something outdoor recreation infrastructure is proposed, or any outdoor recreation RFA is brought up, that everybody knows we should definitely run it through the process that's been outlined here. And of course, that wouldn't preclude anybody from doing an RFA on their own, but I think this would be the preferred route.
One of the things I think that should be important to highlight is sort of what we want to consider in scope and what's sort of out of scope. There's different grant programs that we have, and so I think as projects come up, like for example, what's the difference? I think we having a clear understanding of like what's the difference between this program and say the UR grant program, and I think that having some of those criteria maybe spelled out a little bit, like if it's a local, municipality or county that wants to build something that's a little bit more localized, and of course the UR grants have matching requirements, and I think that they don't allow for maintenance projects. They're mainly for new capital projects, correct?
Right.
And so we might have projects that fit really well with as a UR grant. Hey, we're asking for $500,000. It's for this thing that's mostly is kind of like a local thing. Hey, that's a great candidate for a UR grant. Versus, I would see that this program, and yeah, we need to have a good name for it, because I don't want to just say like the ORI program. I think Patrick, you were calling we could call it the ORI program, or the I forget what you called it, Jason.
Well, you called it Recreation Coordinated Investment Initiative, and I just went with RECI.
Oh,
RCII.
Is that what we put? Is that what I put in the bill?
RECI's not in there, but yeah, Recreation Coordinated Investment Initiative created in this part. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I keep saying RECI, but nobody's picking up, so maybe that will die here.
So if I don't like the name, then I don't have anybody to blame but myself. Then I suppose is what you're saying. That the program that it will yet be named, personally, I would think that we could look at larger projects of regional significance, things that might, for example, connect, or tie together different recreation areas, or help, develop something out in a specific area. But that's, I think, in my mind, is something that is maybe more of regional significance, that the state would want to have particular involvement with, and because I don't believe it doesn't necessarily require a local match, although it certainly could, and it could also involve some. We left it open for maintenance as well, so it could be for some maintenance and upgrades of existing infrastructure as well. I think in conjunction with HB 224, which is the shared stewardship program, where we could coordinate between, say, Forest Service, BLM, counties, other different layers of government. These funds also could then go for those types of projects as well, to help fund some of those shared stewardship agreements, and at least the state portion of it. We may put in some state dollars out of this fund, and then also have some federal dollars, that we pool together to manage some of these areas as well. So just to keep in mind, just to kind of lay the groundwork of sort of like the vision for what the types of projects these funds might go toward.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole idea behind getting a full list from those partners that we would enter into agreements with. Look at all of those potential agreements, and those potential projects, and then find where is that gap. Because we do have the regional asset tier in the UOR grant. Those are regionally significant, but this may be something that maybe just doesn't necessarily fit the grant model. Maybe there's matching issues. It also might even be bigger. It might be statewide significance, bigger than just regional.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the lens we're applying thus far. But we do have to start from scratch and come up with this process. But yeah, once it's in place, we'll bring it back to this group and get some feedback.
If I could make the recommendation that we've had a lot of good social capital built up through this workshop series, and it would be one possibility would be to continue that process and use the Association of Governments regions as a mechanism to forward grant proposals to the OAC. I think that could lend a lot of support and build trust in the process as something that is valid, formalized, and very transparent, as opposed to making it open and a free-for-all for anybody that has the most interest and capacity. I think we would run quickly into the problem of having the best grant proposals and the grant applications coming from the areas that are resourced and staffed in a capacity to do that, in much the same challenges that the UOR grant program has had so far. So if I could lend the suggestion that there has been a lot of social capital that's been built up in these workshops, using the AOGs as the kind of geographic boundaries, and that would maybe solidify the need for local constituents, local stakeholders to get together and propose one, two, or a couple proposals from each AOG. And when you're talking about this, the current fiscal year of $18 million, providing the funding to structure and facilitate those workshops is relatively marginal. It's essentially a rounding error on that funding to get those proposals maybe in a transparent and logical process back to the AOC. So that's one proposal that we would recommend, that maybe align some continuity between the strategic planning process and some transparency in how the proposals are being brought to the OAC, as opposed to having it be open for everyone.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you for that. And we'll definitely put that in our conversations as we get closer.
Yeah, that's great. Any other comments about that? Thoughts? Okay. So does that conclude your presentation, Jason?
Yes.
On that? Great, thank you so much. This is exciting. And so we'll go to item number 7, OHV Recreation Grant rule changes. Go ahead.
Yeah, it has my name there, and I'm going to turn the time directly over to our counsel, Shane Stroud.
Thanks, Jason. So you can see on the agenda that there's a 7 and an 8, but they should actually be combined. So I'll just combine those and shorten the agenda accordingly. In the packet you received today, you'll see that there is a proposed rule for the off-highway vehicle recreation grant program. So let me just tell you why that's before you today. The Outdoor Recreation Act requires that the division promulgate certain rules, including rules pertaining to administration of outdoor recreation grants, and that before we file those with rulemaking and before they go to Director Ferry for final approval, that we notify the OAC of that rule. And so that's what we're doing here today. Now, it might feel a bit like deja vu for some of you, because if you remember, we actually notified you of some changes to this same rule near the end of last year. But after we had notified the OAC of that pending rule change, but before we took it to Director Ferry and filed it with the Office of Administrative Rules, we heard some feedback on the rule from some folks in the OHV community, and there were some concerns over limitations we had placed on use of access protection funds. Access protection is an area of grant that is explicitly allowed under the legislation that enables the division to administer outdoor recreation grants. And we had previously made access protection funds off limits for legal work or litigation work. But after discussing with folks in the OHV community, and then some pretty close coordination with some of our attorneys and advisors in the Public Lands Policy Coordinating Office, the division determined that opening up the availability of grants to fund certain types of litigation or other legal work was probably in the best interest of the OHV community and in the spirit of the legislation that enables this grant. And so you'll see that the addition to this rule is actually, it's labeled here as R650-301-7. Off-highway vehicle access protection grants. And let me just tell you exactly what this allows. So it allows for the use of grant monies to fund projects that further the interest of preserving existing off-highway vehicle routes on public lands, for projects that further efforts of Utah counties or Utah municipalities to document the existence of public rights-of-way. And then if the project is one that includes costs related to litigation or other legal work, it allows those funds to be used for those if the division determines that the work is not unnecessarily duplicative of other work that's going on, specifically work being undertaken by counties or cities or PLPCO, and that the access protection litigation or other legal work would not conflict with other access protection legal work being undertaken, and that the program funds, when they're used with the recipient's match, would be sufficient to deliver a deliverable product. So that's just to ensure that funds aren't being used to fund litigation or other legal work that, you know, might end up in some black hole of attorney's fees, and instead we want to make sure that those funds are used for some sort of deliverable product, whether that be a full-fledged litigation or maybe something a little bit more discreet like a brief or some other type of legal work that could advance access protection interests. And then we also put some guardrails on these funds. Funds cannot be used to bring claim against private landowners or any state agency or political subdivision. Funds can't be used for overhead expenses, and then funds can only be used for travel expenses if the division determines those travel expenses are necessary and reasonable. So those are essentially the changes we made since the last iteration of this rule. Other than that, the rule is, I think, how it came to you last December, and so I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but otherwise, we will slate this for final approval by Director Ferry and then filing with the Office of Administrative Rules.
Chairman Stanquist,
Yes, go ahead.
could you give us maybe an example of what would and would not qualify as rising to the merit of funding for legal efforts?
Sure, I can give you an example of that. So it could be something like an amicus brief that supports a position that PLPCO had taken. So for example, if a user group requested money to file an amicus brief in support of something that PLPCO was undertaking, that might be an example of a piece of legal work that could be funded by this access protection dollars. It could also take the form of intervention by a OHV user group that could advance OHV access protection interests on the public lands.
Thank you. I think that's important. Good use of funds.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that. This is a good one. So So you're looking for a motion, or just, it's just informational? You're just
Yep,
informing
this
us?
is just informational. I don't think we need a motion on this. We just wanted to make sure you're notified of that and answer any questions you might have.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions about this? Okay,
Great, thank you.
great, thanks so much. And that's the last item that we have on the agenda for today. So if there's no other items of discussion, we can talk about, I don't know if we have a time and date for our next meeting, or are we just going to do that via email and a doodle poll for our next meeting?
Yeah, I just sent out a form, so if you could tell us which dates of or what kind of cadence you want to see.
Okay.
There's certain weeks that are good for you. And then this room will be under construction, so we'll probably physically be in a different room somewhere in our building.
Okay, so that information on location, it will be forthcoming. And I assume, I mean, if we have items for a June meeting, we can do a June meeting, but certainly it sounds like July, we're going to have a lot of these workshops between now and then, I think the July meeting will be a good one when we have, sounds like that's our target for our draft plan after the workshops. So that'll be great. Yeah, so please take a look, for all the commission members, please take a look at at that email and give your input on when you're available for a meeting. And of course, there's, we always will provide virtual options if you can't come in person. So, all right. Well, if there are no other items of discussion, I'll call for a final motion.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, non-debatable, all in favor, say aye. Aye, thank you.